Susan would be described glowingly by one of her many cousins as like an angel on earth. She was a sweetheart. In researching Susan's untimely death and short life with those who knew her, it soon becomes obvious that she was an unlikely victim of homicide. She was considered a popular young lady from a highly regarded family. No vices or anything untoward in her background could be identified. Add to this the fact that Susan's murder was the first homicide in Weldon in decades, leaves you trying to make sense of what occurred and why. The Facebook page Who Murdered Susan Shearin Clary features mostly faded photos of the young Susan Shearin smiling. She appears as a child from a different era, one of small-town America and a safe, modest upbringing. Other pictures show Susan and her older brother Mike enjoying themselves at home and at family gatherings over the years. An undeniable bond between the siblings comes through in these pictures. There are family snapshots of her birthday parties at various ages. Her official high school graduation headshot from 1980 displays Susan in a cap and gown. A wedding photo jumps out. It's a more mature Susan looking directly at the camera, ready to commence one of life's biggest commitments. Clutching a bridal bouquet, she's wearing a classic white gown with a long veil. As she posed for the portrait, Susan was unaware she had just over a year to live. Susan would be described glowingly by one of her many cousins as being like an angel on earth. She was a sweetheart. In researching Susan's untimely death and short life with those who knew her, it soon becomes obvious she was an unlikely victim of homicide. She was considered a popular young lady from a highly regarded family. No vices or anything untoward in her background could be identified. Susan's murder was the first homicide in Weldon in decades. Time moved on after her brutal killing, but the town remained shaken by the notion that a killer remained unidentified in its midst, and that continuing uneasiness would serve as a reminder of that bleak time in the spring of 1983. Susan was adopted. Her parents, Herman and Maurice, pronounced Maurice, were unable to conceive. Maurice had lost twins earlier during a complicated pregnancy, leaving her unable to fall pregnant. Susan also had an adopted brother, Michael, who was 3 years older. Herman was a prominent businessman in the region, working as a manager for bi-county gas producers. He also was at one time a Weldon commissioner, vice chairman of the school board, and a deacon at Weldon Baptist Church. Maurice was a busy working mother for most part and lived for her children. The family was middle class by Weldon standards, and lived in a large home on Sycamore Street. The family regularly vacationed at Atlantic Beach. However, Susan and Michael were not spoiled, and both children, at Maurice's insistence, worked part-time jobs from the time they started driving at 16. One of her closest childhood friends, Lynette, really remembers Susan as a happy and funny girl who could be reserved at times. Susan played the flute in the high school band, Yearly said. She was smart. We were both in the Junior Achievement Program in the last 2 years of school. Susan had also qualified for membership to the National Honor Society. We skipped school on a regular basis. Not days, but classes. We would tell the principal that I had left a textbook at home, and therefore Susan had to drive me home to retrieve it. Keeping in mind her dad was on the school board. So we were able to skip school without having a problem. Yearly said they would also go get donuts, and bring some back to the principal, who would write them a note for the teacher. She was really fun to be around, Yearly said. We did all the usual teenage stuff together. In our later high school years, we spent more time in Susan's car driving around the town than doing anything else. Meeting friends from area schools at the Pizza Hut parking lot was considered entertainment. In describing Susan's plans after high school, Yearly said her friend was happy to stay close to home. Susan really was a small-town girl, Yearly said. She seemed happy with the idea to get married, have kids and be near her family. Yearly routinely visits Cedarwood Cemetery in Weldon to sit beside Susan's grave and lament the loss of her close friend. I talk to her and cry, Yearly said. I want her to be at peace. I tell her how much I love her and how much she is missed. I have also asked Susan to tell me what happened to her. After graduating from Weldon High School in June 1980, Susan enrolled at Halifax Community College. During the spring of 1982, she married her sweetheart, local man Tim Clary, in a ceremony at Weldon Baptist Church. They had been dating for the prior 2 years. From Roanoke Rapids, Tim Clary worked at the Champion Paper Mill, a major employer in Halifax County. Susan was employed as an assistant clerk at the town of Weldon's tax collection office. By November 1982, Susan, 20 at the time, was pregnant with her first child. She confirmed excitedly to family and friends that the young couple had already named their unborn child, a boy, Chad Ray. Located in Halifax County, Weldon is about 90 miles northeast of Raleigh. Known as the rockfish capital of the world, Weldon sits just east of Interstate 95. Roanoke Rapids is on the western side of I-95, directly opposite Weldon. Some folks regard Weldon as just an interstate town. Roanoke Rapids has had economic growth and good fortune in recent decades, while Weldon, with a population hovering around 2,000 residents, has suffered a prolonged economic downturn. In earlier times, though, Weldon was a go-ahead place. White settlers, mostly English colonists, originally came to the area in the early 1700s. By the mid-1800s it was a major railway hub in the south with 5 railroads heading in all directions. In 1823, a canal more than 7 miles long was built adjacent to the Weldon Township, which served as safe passage to watercraft bypassing the river's rocks and rapids. The waterway opened trade with Virginia and helped stimulate business opportunities. Textile and paper production were growth industries in the region, and the town prospered. The main street developed into a hive of activity with privately owned small businesses including specialty clothing stores owned by local Jewish families. Sammy Shearin, Susan's cousin, says of Weldon, in the 60s and 70s there would be not a better place in the world to live. But over time, it started to decline as the manufacturing base in the region diminished, the new highway system bypassed the town, and the next generation of residents left the county for greater opportunities. Newlyweds Tim and Susan Clary lived in a rented house at 937 Washington Avenue just on the outskirts of Weldon's town limits. Washington Avenue is one of the main thoroughfares through town. At the northernmost end of the road, it meets the Weldon Historic District, where the Weldon Police Department and Post Office are located. The Weldon Elementary School site is no more than 250 meters north of the Clary home. Going south, the avenue passes through South Weldon to meet US 301, adjacent to the Roanoke Company. Built in the early 1900s, the couple's single-level, 3-bedroom rental sat on a half-acre block. The front porch sits less than 10 meters from the roadside. Today, the house is pretty much unchanged from what it looked like in the 80s. A gravel driveway down the side of the property leads to a freestanding garage. Typical of the other houses in the area, there is no real fence. The property backs onto a wooded area or easement that blocks visibility to the neighbors to the rear, whose houses sit on Sycamore Street, running parallel to Washington Avenue. Both sides of the house have a tree line where the property line would be located, obscuring the view of the immediate neighbors. What occurred at the Clary home on Washington Avenue on the Monday morning of May 16, 1983, has been a cause for speculation for close to 4 decades. Susan was due at work at the town hall by 8:30 a.m. Her husband was believed to have left the house earlier in the morning to visit his father. He told investigators he went to his father's property in Roanoke Rapids to help build a garage. Tim Clary has confirmed to police many times over the years that when he left home just before 7 a.m., Susan was still in bed asleep. She was due at work at 8:30 a.m. Out of the ordinary routine for a weekday, Susan was to meet her mother around mid-morning to sit down with a local real estate agent. This appointment was to take place at Maurice's work office, where she was employed by an insurance broker. Susan didn't arrive at the appointment. Immediately, Maurice phoned Susan's work to see if she forgot about it. A town hall worker told Maurice her daughter hadn't arrived that morning. A concerned Maurice called her husband and asked if he could go check on their daughter. As Herman arrived at the Clary home around 9:30 a.m., he immediately noticed the rear door was open. Upon entering the main bedroom at the front of the house, he encountered a nightmarish scene. Herman found his daughter unresponsive, lying face up on her bed. She was naked and heavily pregnant, with a bra wrapped around her neck. The medical examiner's report would later state she most likely died due to asphyxiation secondary to strangulation. It was unlikely the bra was used to manually strangle Susan. She had not been sexually assaulted, though a bruise to her temple indicated some type of recent physical assault. Frantic, Herman placed Susan on the floor and began CPR. With Susan remaining unconscious and not breathing, he quickly phoned emergency services. As EMTs and police arrived, they were confused by the crime scene's layout. First, there was no obvious forced entry. No evidence that the house was ransacked in any way. On inspection by investigators, no items appeared to be stolen. Physical evidence indicated Susan likely struggled with her killer in another room of the house, before being forced into the main bedroom. The double bed had been repositioned in the bedroom, and a large footstool had been moved out of place. 2 firearms, believed to be handguns, were placed on top of bedroom dressers. Neither gun had been fired, and both looked to be wiped clean of any fingerprints. Both guns were owned by Tim Clary, and were usually hidden within the household for safety reasons. Investigators noted the young couple owned a large dog, a Doberman, which from all reports was known to be aggressive and loud. Neighbors would tell police they hadn't heard the dog bark that morning. A Reese's peanut butter cup wrapper lay next to the bathtub, indicating Susan had probably consumed some chocolate. The bathtub appeared like it had just been used, with remnants of water in the tub. Her mother would confirm a morning bath, and Reese's chocolate as a snack were part of Susan's morning routine, usually commencing around 7:30 a.m. To date, no one has been charged in Susan's homicide. The investigation sits with the Halifax County Sheriff's Office headed by Sheriff Wes Tripp, who worked part-time with Susan at Taylor's Fish House in Roanoke Rapids, while they were both in high school. If the Sheriff's Office has material evidence from the crime scene pointing to a specific suspect, it's keeping the information under wraps. One investigative theory has stuck to the case file, however, that the crime scene was staged to make what transpired at the Clary house look like a break-in gone wrong or home invasion. Staging occurs, according to FBI profile and author John Douglas, writing with Curry and Munn in 1992's Crime Classification Manual, when someone purposefully alters a crime scene prior to investigators' arrival, in order to either redirect the investigation away from the most logical suspect, or to protect the victim or the victim's family. Former Chief Deputy Bruce Temple, who retired in 2015, told Rel TV in 2011 that Susan's death may have been something that happened spontaneously that resulted in her death. It may not have been an intended homicide. Temple, a longtime law enforcement officer with nearly 30 years' tenure in Halifax County, continues to favor the staging theory regarding the crime scene. I see the staging as a post-homicide response by the perpetrator to the killing of Susan Clary, he said. Temple investigated the case from 2007 until his departure from the sheriff's office. It's a case that continues to stick with him today. I mentioned the Clary case at my retirement party from the sheriff's office, Temple said. Being unable to resolve this murder has left me with an empty feeling inside. Captain Joe Seeley, the current investigator assigned to the case, recently confirmed that while there have been no new advancements, the case file is regularly reviewed. The list of suspects has been whittled down over the years, Seeley said. We will continue to revisit the Clary murder on a regular basis to develop new perspectives and follow up potential leads. Attempts to contact Tim Clary for this story were unsuccessful. Sammy, at his Aunt Maurice's request, made a personal commitment to continue to look for answers into who killed his cousin, and why. Susan's father Herman died in 1997 from a heart attack. The Shearin family believes he never recovered from the pain of losing his only daughter. Maurice died in 2014. The only remaining family member, Michael Shearin, died in 2015 after a short illness. Maurice had expressed her decades-old grief in an emotional 2011 interview with Rel TV, saying, "I've got an emptiness that I can't ever fill." According to her nephew Sammy Shearin, Maurice remained committed to finding the identity of Susan's and baby Chad's killer. Even till the day that she died, Sammy said. I mean, she carried that burden with her everywhere. Anyone with information related to the murder of Susan Shearin Clary can call the Halifax County Sheriff's Office at 252-583-8201 or Halifax County Crime Stoppers at 252-583-4444.